of the Senate being contested in regular elections, and there will also be two special elections, one in Arizona to fill the vacancy created by the death of John McCain in 2019, and there's one in Georgia following the resignation of Johnny Isaacson at the end of last year. So in total, there are 35 seats up for re-election in the Senate. So that means Republicans will be defending 23 seats in 2020, while the Democrats will be defending 12 seats. So Democrats, given the majority, Democrats will need to pick up 3 or 4 seats to gain a majority. And of course, that also depends on how many seats they will need, will depend on which party wins control of the vice presidency. So it will probably come down to 7 key races across the country. So the question is, can the Democrats pull it off? They might. Democratic challengers in 2 states, Arizona and Colorado, they seem to have a good chance in defeating Republican incumbents, while in other places, only one Democratic incumbent in Alabama looks especially vulnerable. So the Democrats' top targets are these 3 states, Maine, North Carolina, and Iowa. And in all the 3 races, the incumbent Republicans are in a very tricky situation because of the unpopularity of President Trump. And the Democratic opponents could capitalize on high voter turnout, the high turnout among the voters who want to see Trump defeated. And another troubling sign for Republicans is the broader demographic trends. The first one is Trump is losing among women. Fewer and fewer women are saying that they will support Trump in 2020. Suburban voters are also abandoning Trump. And he's even losing among whites without a college degree, which has formed an important component of his base in 2016. But of course, with the campaign still ongoing, there is still time for these races to change, right? Because, I mean, last minute, we're gonna have another presidential debate between Trump and Biden tonight. Last minute political fallout from the debate could impact the race, or the pandemic, the economy, or some unforeseen twist could change the races yet again at the last minute. Of course, Republicans are hoping that the political fight over the Supreme Court nominee, who is Amy Barrett, will galvanize conservative voters. So that's the hope of the Republicans. And they might have a point there, because it has worked before. In 2018, the fight over Justice Kavanaugh mobilized conservative voters in midterm elections in 2018. So they're hoping a similar scenario is going to play out this year. But I think ultimately, this year's congressional elections are a referendum on President Trump. And this is a dynamic that we have not seen before, in the sense that usually voters, they have different considerations in mind when they vote for the Congress. And I think the fact that everything is now focused on the character of President Trump is a testament to how polarized American society has become in the last few years. And if you look at the Democratic front, the polls are once again delivering encouraging news to Democrats, because Joe Biden, according to the polls, Joe Biden beats President Trump by double digits, by 10, 11, 12 points nationally. And Biden has an edge in places like key states like Michigan, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, which played a key role in Trump's victory in 2016. And according to the polls, Biden is leading by an average of 8 points in those key states. So this is all feel-good news for the Democrats, but of course, then the Democrats remember that they've been here before, 4 years ago, when polls were telling a feel-good story to Clinton supporters 3 weeks out from elections, but she lost Electoral College and thus the presidency. So that's why there's a lot of anxiety on the Biden front. But Biden seems in better shape than Hillary Clinton was 4 years ago. Polling shows Biden's position stronger on several fronts than Clinton's advantage at this point in 2016, including in the national polls. So Biden today has something that Hillary Clinton did not have in 2016, which is he has a lead among independents, he has a lead among seniors, and also white college graduates and suburban voters. So that is important. But I have to underline that it is still a very polarized country, and the Trump win is still within the realm of possibility. And Biden team knows that, and that's why they're very anxious. Biden campaign manager Jan Dillon said, all the polls show that we are leading double digits, but national polls do not really tell us much about the pathway to the 270 electoral votes. So the Biden campaign is aware that even the best polling can be wrong. And in critical states, Biden and Trump are tied. So this brings me to a critical question in US elections, which is why is it that one candidate can win the popular vote, but another candidate wins the electoral vote and thus the presidency? So that's an important question to answer. As you all know, in 2016, Clinton received nearly 2.9 million more votes than Trump in the presidential election, 2.9 million votes. But she lost the presidency because Trump won the Electoral College, which came after he ended up narrow victories in less populated Midwestern states such as Michigan and Wisconsin. So there's a hybrid system. That's how the US Constitution is set up, right? The Electoral College was a compromise between those who wanted to elect the president directly through popular elections and those who wanted Congress to decide. So Electoral College has 538 members, and that number allocated to each state is based on how many representatives that particular state has in the House, plus its 2 senators. So to be elected president, the winner must get at least half plus 1, or 270 electoral votes. So this hybrid system means that a single vote in a small state carries more weight than the vote of someone in a larger state. So that's why presidential candidates, they have to focus on the states that candidate must win to gather those 270 electoral votes. So what are the key battleground states that are important for this year's candidates to win the presidency? There are a couple: Arizona, Florida, you have Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and I'm missing one, and Wisconsin. So good news for the Biden team, because Biden has a lead in all but one of them. So there are specific strategies for both camps. Trump has to max out his performance with rural voters. And he has to stop the erosion that's been going on in erosion in support in the suburbs. And Trump has to make sure that white working class voters who didn't vote in 2016 turnout. So that has to be Trump's strategy. Biden, on the other hand, needs a huge turnout in the big cities, particularly among African-American voters. And also, he has to do more to increase his share among Latino voters. And of course, he has to recapture some of the places that flipped to Trump in 2016. The question is, how successful has each candidate been at meeting these goals? Honestly, I can't tell. Maybe, I mean, one thing is certain, Trump has failed to stop the erosion in the suburbs, particularly among women. But other than that, everything is up in the air, and we are a few days out from, 12 days, I believe, out from election day, and I still cannot say comfortably that Biden is going to win, despite all the polls showing he has a double-digit lead. And I think neither the Biden team is certain or comfortable. But I can say one thing with certainty, and that is the process after November 3rd is going to be messy. I mean, really messy. Imagine this election night scenario, right? With a great number of mail ballots yet to be counted, and Trump enjoys a narrow lead over Biden. But before all the votes can be counted, and remember, this is a process that can take days and weeks. So before all the votes can be counted, Trump declares victory. I mean, mail ballots, they take longer to count than in-person ballots. So we could very much have a situation where the initial results make it seem like Trump votes are way up, because remember, he has been encouraging his supporters to vote in person. So when you start counting those votes, there could be a scenario where the initial results look like he's winning. Trump votes are way up because the mail ballots that are largely cast by Democrats haven't been counted yet. But once they start counting mail ballots, Biden may take the lead, which is a completely normal situation. But Trump is gonna claim that it's evidence of rigged election. So in such a scenario, probably courts will get involved. And I think that is one of the reasons why Trump and Republicans have been rushing the nomination of Judge Amy Barrett in the middle of elections. I mean, in the middle of elections, millions of people are voting right now, and the confirmation is happening while voting is underway. So I know, Özgür, you wanted a prediction, but I think at this point it's really difficult because, I mean, we've seen what happened in 2016. Hillary Clinton was at this point, at this time in elections 4 years ago. Many polls predicted that she was gonna win. She was leading Trump at double digits. So the exact same situation, and yet she lost. So I think the Democrats are quite anxious, although many of them, some of them are more hopeful, saying that they have learned a lot from the mistakes that have been made in 2016. Polling companies have learned a lot. Remember, one of the problems with 2016 polling was the fact that they really disregarded the education level. The Democrats are more likely to answer phones, to fill out surveys, and that wasn't really factored into their calculations. So the argument is that now the polling companies have learned the lesson, so that's why they might be doing a better job in terms of sampling. And also the Biden team is saying that they have learned their lesson too. So they don't, unlike the Clinton campaign, Clinton team that relied exclusively on these polls, the Biden team is saying that, no, we've learned our lesson. We understand that these polls have significant shortcomings and we're not going to rely on them. We're not going to get comfortable. And in fact, no Democrat is comfortable. So I'll end my remarks with that happy, positive note. Özgür, we can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Gönül. It was a great overview. I said, you mentioned all the uncertainties surrounding the election and the situation so far. Should we then go ahead with the Q&A from the floor?
Sure.
Questions from the floor. Okay. Great. Gizem Dal?
Gönül Hocam, first of all, thank you for being here. I have two questions. The first one is what are the main issues debated in the election, and the second one, especially in the presidential election. So, thank you.
Well, if you look at public opinion polls, I think the issues are quite clear, Gizem. The country is in the midst of a recession, right? I mean, so that's reflected in the polls. Nearly 80% of registered voters say that the economy will be very important to them in making their decision about who to vote for in the elections. So economy, I would say, is the top issue. And the next issue, the next top issue is, I would say, healthcare. Again, close to 70% of voters say that healthcare is very important to their vote. And another 64% say the Supreme Court appointments is a critical issue when they cast their ballot. And obviously, there is the question of the coronavirus outbreak. It's the US is still, I think every other country in the world still continue to grapple with the pandemic. So 62% of registered voters in the US say that the outbreak will be a very important factor in their decision about who to support in November. But of course, there are differences in how registered voters who support Donald Trump and voters who support Joe Biden view the importance of these issues. For Trump supporters, for instance, the economy and I would say violent crime are the most important salient issues. Trump supporters also cite immigration, gun policy, and foreign policy as very important to their vote. But if you look at Biden supporters, they view healthcare and the coronavirus outbreak as the most important issues. And a sizable majority also rates racial and ethnic inequality as important to their vote.
Hocam, for those of us who don't know the American system very well, you use the term registered voter, but it doesn't ring a bell in Turkey because everybody is registered by the government in Turkey, right? But in the United States, this is an issue, right?
Yeah, that's
right. It's a political issue.
It's a political issue, Özgür, and it's actually it's become the topic of a larger debate. Yeah, you have to register in this country to be able to vote, and if you look at the turnout, it's a sad state really, because 60% or so vote. 6 in 10 registered voters vote in elections, and that's a worrying number. So that's why I've seen commentary on this, some prominent names urging compulsory voting, because they are making the argument that when you have such low turnout, this is not really, the process is not really democratic, so you really have to make it compulsory. I think it's the other extreme, but the fact that there's a debate on this is, I think, is very telling. So yes, low turnout has always been a problem in this country.
Today I saw it on Twitter. It is so different than Turkey or Europe. I think it was Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most famous athletes in America. He tweeted that he voted today for the first time in his life.
Yeah.
He's like 50 years old, 50 plus, and he said it feels good. And I was like, wow, it's such a different political culture.
It is, and I have to note this. I think I'm sure you've all seen how Hollywood actors and actresses, they have mobilized in an effort to encourage people to go out and vote. So some of them are taking off their clothes just to increase awareness. And I've seen here on university campuses that young people, and that's been a problem too. I mean, this is not something that we see in countries like Turkey, in political countries like Turkey, where you have like 80%, 85% voter turnout, which is excellent. But I mean, in this country, it's so low, and particularly the young people, they don't have a tendency to vote. The last time something excited them was President Obama. They went out to vote in large numbers, because that was an exciting year for many of those young people. So this year they have formed several platforms. Young people, university students, they have launched several platforms in an effort to increase voter turnout among young people. So you see this great mobilization, and the Republicans, I must say, Republicans are also registering voters in incredible numbers. So I think at the end of the day, I mean, I know I talked about the issues that they have to, the candidates have to address, the strategies that they have to adopt to win. But at the end of the day, this election is about who is gonna bring out voters, who is gonna mobilize its base. So I think someone asked me a question on this. Someone said, so why is Trump still so crazy? I mean, he doesn't back down on his crazy messages. He is as radical as he was in 2016. How come he did not adjust his strategy? And my answer to that is because his entire strategy rests on, if I can mobilize those people who voted for me in 2016, I'm gonna be fine. And the same is true for the Democrats. So this is a matter, the elections are about who is gonna attract more voters to come out and vote. So mobilization is key, and we have seen on both fronts, both on the Biden front and on the Republican front, this extraordinary effort to make sure that people go out and vote.
Great. Other questions?
I could ask.
Sorry. Excuse me.
I was wondering, so we were talking like about the polarization earlier and how it is really about the turnout. So at this point, how much are the campaigns putting into convincing these sort of like undecided voters onto joining their side, people that didn't vote for them previously to vote for them this year? Is it like a waste of time at this point, right? I mean, how much importance is given to that group of people?
I think the Biden campaign is paying more attention to that. I mean, because if you look at the messaging of the Trump campaign, he's pretty much carrying out a similar campaign as he did in 2016, right? He's using the same narrative. He's playing to his hardcore base, and if you look at it, it's he has actually. If you look at Trump campaign, I'm not sure about the numbers, but I think 90+% of his supporters still think that he's delivered. And if you actually look at the things that he's done, the promises that he's made, he's kept them. I mean, he talked about lowering taxes. He did, and not just for the rich, but also for middle class voters. It had a huge impact in their lives. He talked about curtailing immigration, which he did. He talked about building a wall. That wasn't really 100% done. He built a wall, but he had promised that it was going to be paid by Mexico. Mexico obviously didn't pay for it. But if you look at the things that his supporters care about, he delivered on many of the promises that he's made, except for a few and yet important stuff. So he is using the same strategy because he thinks that he made promises, he kept his promises, and he's focusing on that. So the Biden campaign is, I think, trying to they face a tougher challenge, right? The Biden campaign, because they want to make sure that the states that were captured by Trump in 2016, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and those were states that voted for Obama, by the way. And yet they flipped Trump in 2016. So Biden is trying to make sure that he can recapture those states. So that means a lot of fine-tuning. He's been very careful with his messaging. I mean, one of the speeches that he has delivered in Pennsylvania, I believe, he said, look, this guy, Trump, he's a billionaire, right? He's rich. What does he know about how much you are suffering economically? But I was born here. I was born to a working class family. I understand your concerns. So he's trying to appeal to white working class. Now the question is, has he been effective? I've heard conflicting stuff. I've heard the New York Times has this excellent podcast. They talk to people in Pennsylvania. They talk to people who had been lifelong supporters of Democrats, but they voted for Trump in 2016 because they thought Democrats haven't done anything for us. So they switched in 2016. So after Biden's message, the New York Times talked to those people to try to understand whether Biden's message was appealing to them. And the majority of them said, no, actually, we don't find Democrats to be in touch with the working class. And that falls on Clinton's. That I think that Hillary Clinton made such a big mistake. Maybe you will all remember when she made fun of those white working class people who supported Trump. He said they are deplorables. Half of them are deplorables. So, and also Hillary Clinton's image as this elite who is clueless about the lives and the struggles of the working class. I think that was a breaking point in the sense that people started seeing the Democrats as a party that was out of touch with the reality of everyday people. And that's when you saw these people switching to President Trump. And obviously Joe Biden is a completely different profile than Hillary Clinton. He has much more appeal to the white class, the white working class. And he's been using that in his narrative. But the New York Times, when they talked to these people, many of them said, yeah, Biden is okay, but we really don't think the Democrats are going to do much for us. And they say Trump has still delivered, although several plants have been closed down in their states, and many of them lost their jobs. They still trust Trump with the economy more than they trust Biden. So the question comes down to, can you really appeal to these people? I'm not sure. The polling, some polling says Biden has done a better job than Hillary Clinton in terms of capturing the attention and loyalty of those people. But there are others who think that Trump has done a great job with economy. And here the narrative is that yeah, COVID happened, but it wasn't Trump's fault, right? He did everything he could. And we are seeing an economic downturn because of that. But Trump is going to fix it. So that is the narrative. But you also see a separate group of voters who are undecided, who really value the way the White House is handling the coronavirus pandemic. And you have seniors mostly among those people. When they see their candidate for Senate, a Republican candidate, not wearing a mask in a super spreader event at the White House, they worry. When they see their president, who had just contracted coronavirus and got out of the hospital, taking off his mask, they worry. So I think one of the key constituencies, the target constituency, is going to be those people who are extremely worried about coronavirus. And I think if you look at that population, a majority of them trust Biden more than they trust Trump.
Okay, I have many questions here, so let me just get maybe 3 of them. I'll just get them in bunches. Okay, if it's fine with you, Gönül. Işıl, Deniz, and Seray. Can you ask your questions quickly?
Hi, Gönül Hocam, and thank you for your remarks on the presidential elections and the congressional elections. My question is regarding your expertise. Do you think Middle East as a region is an issue for the presidential or congressional elections?
Well, thank you, Işıl. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, we're going to bundle a few. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, bundle, yes. Deniz?
Hi, can you hear me? Is my voice okay? Okay. Thank you for being us here tonight, first of all. I wanted to turn to the more foreign policy related issues and wanted to ask if the presidential election, if the foreign policies are a big and important part of the presidential election about to take place. And if so, I wanted to ask further that what are the most important hot topics related to foreign policy during the presidential debates.
Seray? Thank you.
Thank you, Gönül Hocam. I know you said it's hard to make predictions on the results, but I wonder your opinion on how can the results can change Turkey and US relations. For example, what happens if Trump wins and what happens if Democrats control both the House and Senate? Thank you.
3 very related bundled questions. Hocam.
Yeah, they are all great questions. Thank you. So to Işıl's and Deniz's questions about how prominent foreign policy has been in this campaign. Well, according to this polling, I believe it was from ABC, 57% say foreign policy is an important issue. But frankly, it has been missing from the 2020 campaign. I mean, even issues such as Russia and China have been framed largely around their domestic implications, such as interference in election security and the local effect of President Donald Trump's trade wars. So, and I think this is part of a general decline. There has been a decline in public interest in global events. We talk about this often, how every day we watch NewsHour, PBS NewsHour, and it's incredible how little attention has been paid to foreign policy compared to previous years. So this is, I think, general trend. There has been a decline in interest, in public interest in global events for decades, but it's more so now, given all the domestic problems that demand attention, from the effects of COVID to economic problems and societal unrest and racial injustice. So there's just a long laundry list of problems that the US is facing at the moment. You don't hear much about foreign policy. And ultimately, I'm going to say this again, this election is dominated by Donald Trump's character. And obviously you have salient issues with the pandemic and the economic problems. Foreign policy is simply not a priority for voters. And there was Saray's question about Turkey-US relations. Well, you know, Turkey-US relations have been rocky, to say the least, for the last 5 years or so. And as you all know, problems started under the Obama administration, the US decision to cooperate with the YPG, extradition of Gülen, and then the general lack of trust basically poisoned the partnership, which was off to a good start. Remember Obama delivering its speech at the Turkish parliament. So the relations were off to a good start, but it became very troubling shortly afterwards. So by the time the US elections were held in November 2016, Turkey-US relations had been rocked by serious disagreements. So if you look at it from Erdogan's perspective, the Obama administration ended up being a huge disappointment. So Donald Trump's election was therefore welcome news in Ankara. And I think Erdogan hoped to turn a new page in relations with the US and had the faith in his friend in the White House, President Trump. So 4 years on, this is going to be a long answer to your question, but I think it's important to understand the background to be able to project into the future. So 4 years on, Trump has proven himself worthy of Erdogan's trust, right? At a time when Obama era problems continue to hound Turkey-US relations, which has caused unprecedented frustration, by the way. In the Congress, at the Pentagon, and the State Department, Trump still considers Erdogan a very good friend. And he's done everything. I mean, he's gone the extra mile to shield Erdogan from congressional sanctions. Turkey purchased S-400s, missile defense. I mean, there were just like so many problems, and the Congress was frustrated, and Trump did his best. But despite his best intentions, he couldn't fix the most critical problems. Gülen remains in Pennsylvania. Halkbank has been indicted. Congress is more determined than ever to punish Erdogan over the S-400s. The Syria question remains there. There are a few hundred US troops there in Syria, but they still consider the YPG a key ally. So there are really important problems. So now the question is, can Biden come? And many are promoting a reset in Turkey-US ties, right? Can he do that, or will he be willing to do that? And I think the answer is somewhere between a yes and a no. I mean, should Biden win, I think this prospect is terrifying. It must be terrifying for people in Ankara. It must be terrifying for Erdogan and his circle, because he won't be able to just pick up the phone and reach the US president directly to ask for favors if Biden is elected. Nor will the White House be as enthusiastic about shielding Turkey from the sanctions, right? Because the Congress is infuriated and it's intent on imposing those sanctions. And Biden has been very clear about what he thinks about Erdogan, right? Trump praised Erdogan as a tough guy, and Biden described him as an autocrat. And Biden often talks about how he's committed to strengthening democracy back on the agenda. He talks about, for instance, convening a summit of the world's democracies in his first year. So that suggests he might be vocal about criticizing Erdogan more. You'll remember in 2016 when he was the vice president then, he was on a 2-day visit to Turkey and he angered the Turkish government when he criticized the lack of freedom of expression in the country. And then he met with Can Dündar's wife and son. So he's going to be a more problematic president in terms of Turkey-US ties. And of course, another worry in Ankara is what is Biden going to do in Syria? What we've seen so far is he's been a very pro-Kurdish leader, both in Syria and Iraq. He famously proposed the division of Iraq along ethnic lines and sectarian lines in 2016. And more recently, Biden criticized Trump's decision to pull out troops from Syria and abandon the Kurds. And his close allies, his close aides have signaled that the US would keep troops in Syria to help the Kurdish forces. So that is going to be problematic. And also, I think another worry for Turkey is a Biden presidency might be tougher towards Ankara in the Eastern Mediterranean. There has been, the United States has been cultivating closer ties to Greece under this administration, and the Congress lifted the sanctions imposed on Cyprus, for instance. So Pompeo has often criticized Turkey's aggressive stance in Eastern Mediterranean, but if Biden becomes the president, the fear is that he's going to be even more tougher. So that is a problem. And I think at the end of the day, Biden is going to be potentially more tougher on Russia and China, which will be problematic for Turkey. So so these are all the potential problems. But I think at the end of the day, it won't mean that a Biden presidency is going to burn bridges with Erdogan, because Biden is a guy who really values personal relationships, and he also values institutions. So he's going to be a completely different president than President Trump. But when it comes to foreign policy issues, as you guys, students of IR, know probably better than I do, that structure matters. So you don't operate in a vacuum. So he is going to be taking over a complicated Turkey file, and Biden is going to have other priorities. So he'll have to balance things, which suggests to me that he'll be somewhere in between. He's not going to throw away his partnership with Turkey. Will try to work with Turkey, especially when it comes to counterbalancing Russia, and will work closely in the fight against ISIS. But there will be more problematic areas as well.
I keep forgetting this. Sorry. We have 4 questions left. Let's take them very quickly because I know you have to go somewhere else, and we have 10 minutes left. So, Madeline, Volkan, Ali, and Khan, if you could ask your questions quickly in that order. Madeline?
Hi, thank you again for talking to us. I just wanted to hear your perspective on how voter suppression might be an issue across the congressional elections, and if it will be raised as a problem after the results come in or not.
So,
Okay.
I have a question about, first of all, thank you, Hocam. I have a question on Biden's candidacy. Do you think that Democrats could produce a better candidate than Biden? Because I remember that he was not a well-respected and strong vice president during Obama presidency. And, he is, I think, 78 years old. And, I know he won primaries, so he came through a democratic process, but I don't know, is there a possible better candidate to go against Trump?
Ali?
Yeah, it is my turn. My question is very related to what Volkan asked. So here it is. Since the problems that brought Trump to power are still not totally solved, why Trump doesn't have a rival that is as populist as Trump himself?
Kaan?
Thank you, Professor Tol, for your talk. I wanted to ask about demographics. Do the Republicans over the long term fear a loss of power, a prolonged loss of power due to shifting demographics? Thank you.
Great questions. So on the voter suppression issue, it is an issue. There is maybe you've seen, there are long queues. People waited for 11 hours to vote. There are restrictive voting laws in place, and some of them have been taken to courts. There are limited access to polling stations. And then we have something else, which is the mail-in voting. That's going to be a real problem, because you can track your vote, but it's still, many of the states, they don't have the infrastructure to handle that. That's why in my remarks I said it was going to be really messy. So those are some of the obstacles that we already had in place, but those obstacles have been amplified with the pandemic, which has led to a nationwide shortage of poll workers. So that is a huge problem, and fewer in-person polling stations, right? People are having to people have to do so many things to be able to cast their votes. So it is, some of them have been addressed, but that is something that really that worries me, and I know it worries many people, particularly Democrats, because if the higher turnout is projected to benefit Democrats than it does Trump. So that's why that's a worry that the Democrats have. The second question about whether there was a better candidate than Biden. I mean, my personal view is yes. I think Bernie was a much better candidate than Biden. But of course, and I ask that question to myself very often, especially when I see Biden stumbling, when I see him. He's old and tired. I think he is a very decent human being, but yeah, that's a problem. I mean, he's gonna be old, and that's why picking the right vice president was so important for Biden, and I think he picked the right vice president. But I think overall the question is, would someone like Bernie Sanders, for instance, would he do the job? I mean, I think the worry among many Democrats who were trying to pick from a list of great names was the question that dominated was, can he or she beat Trump? So even die-hard Bernie supporters, some of them said, yeah, we love this guy. He has all the right answers for the problems of the country. And yet, if he runs against Trump, you're gonna give a huge weapon to be used by Trump against someone like Bernie. He's gonna say, he's already saying that for Biden, by the way. Biden could not have been further away from being a socialist. He's such a such a mainstream guy, and yet still he's trying to frame Trump is trying to frame him as a socialist. He's saying that the party has been taken over by the socialists. So I think overall, Biden is the right person for the right time, because this country has suffered. I remember I said what's on the ballot is the key issue is President Trump's personality, his character. So many lies, so many scandals. I think at this point, the people need normalcy. They need a normal president who doesn't obsessively tweet, say outrageous things, constantly lie. So if you look at that, I think Biden's personality is the answer at this point in time. So that's why I think he is the guy who has the ability to capture the votes of undecided people, who has the ability to capture those voters who maybe supported Trump in 2016, but who are tired of the craziness. So in that regard, I think Biden was the right choice. And what was the third question? There was a.
There was one about demographics, I think.
Oh yeah, demographics. That's a very important question. So I think the demographics is in favor, is gonna strengthen the Democrats in the long run, because we are talking about a country in which the number of non-white people is increasing. You have more Latino voters, you have more Asian, so it's going to be a more diverse society with younger votes. So the demographics is actually in favor of Democrats.
I think that's it, Hocam. You answered all of them. Thank you very much for being here. I think this was a wonderful talk. I'm informed. I'm sure all of our students too. And hope to see you again in our department, maybe after the coronavirus, maybe in person.
Yeah, I've never been to your campus, so I'm looking forward to that. And again, thank you again, Özgür. This has been such a pleasure, and thanks to all of you guys for attending and asking great questions. I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Hocam. Good luck.
Thanks.
And stay safe. Hope to see you soon.
You too. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.